Hello, hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Decaf with Mark and Taylor, our very first live episode on Twitter because we are talking about all things Pork Report. I love Pork Report Release Week, even though I'm absolutely exhausted. And Mark and I were on the phone at 6 o'clock yesterday morning, which I would never recommend to anyone, even though we got things done and it was a great time. The Pork Report is out in the world. We know you people love the Pork Report. We love the Pork Report. It gets so much media attention every single year, and we love to see that you guys love it. There was a time where we were like, do we keep doing the Pork Report? Is this something that should be part of our organizational goals? And we came to our senses and realized, yeah, we need to do the Pork Report because the people love it. And what are we if not public servants giving the people what they want? Mark, you did an amazing job with the Pork Report this year. You deserve the credit for this. You and Jason absolutely freaking killed it with this one. Golf clap for you so I don't blow people's ears out with my microphone.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't want to be called a public servant. I don't like that because that makes me feel like I work for the government. So I don't want to be associated with working for the government.
I take it back. But we're really happy to be able to really provide this service to folks because there are so many stories. Last night I was at our Young Professionals event, and this guy who's just so great, he comes to every single event, and he said, yeah, I saw the Pork Report today. I didn't know about the birds. And that was the first entry in our Pork Report, was about birds, illegal search and seizure. And there are so many things that come out in the Pork Report each year that people just don't know about. Blake was watching Fox 17 this morning and said he saw our coverage about the Pork Report, and he was like, I haven't seen it yet. And I sent it to him. He said, oh, I'm so glad y'all went after this, and I'm so glad y'all went after that, and I'm so glad you went after In-N-Out. Like, we're all excited about In-N-Out, but come on. Like, there are so many things that people are happy to see someone going after that is undeniable pork. So Mark, tell us about some of the entries that are in there, some of the coverage we've gotten, the wave that you're riding high on right now after a successful release.
I need to sleep before I can ride high on a wave. But I think that one of the, I do feel like one of the coolest things about this is it really is so, bipartisan in nature. This isn't a red meat for conservatives or a red meat for, it really is like just basic common sense for most of them. Like, this is clearly wrong. And I think that's why this is such a popular report, is because it doesn't really matter where you stand on the political spectrum. You're going to disagree with about 90% of these entries. I mean, you're going to agree with 90% of the entries that they're pork, but that you say, oh, this makes sense.
You're going to disagree that like they should have ever happened.
Correct. So I think that's what makes this report so special, is because, in a place where politically we're so, we're always going at each other's throats. This is one where like everyone's like, yeah, we agree on this. Like, we're on the same side. This is so,
we can get behind it.
I know this is so insane that they've done this. So like, we're on the same side. So I really like that about it. And talking to people across the state, media people across the state, even like off the air, they're like, I can't believe they did this. I'm so glad you guys put this in the report. So it was a really great rollout. We got really great media coverage, and some of the entries that I think are the most interesting. And, I know we're going to talk later about which ones we want to get rid of, but the one that bothered me the absolute most was in Knoxville. And they basically did a search for a new police chief, and they hired a third party search firm because they wanted to avoid public records, which is insane. That's exactly what the government's supposed to do. And then they got sued by the Knoxville News Sentinel. So you got to give them credit, say this should be an open process. The police chief who's applying these things like that. And they got sued. They lost. And the lawyer during the lawsuit said that the only reason that they did that was to avoid public records. So it wasn't like it was a incompetence, which happens a lot in this Pork Report. It was an intentional thing in order to avoid these. Exactly. Which is
just
horrible.
Like being sneaky and evasive. And like, it's something that I personally don't think it matters what side of the political spectrum you're on. We want transparency in government. Like, that's why these laws exist. It is a nonpartisan, bipartisan, however you want to say it, thing to have transparency in government, no matter what side you're on. And I think when you sign up to work for the government or sign up to run for public office, you know that you're signing up for a job where there is transparency, and that's just showbiz, baby. And so trying to skirt those open records laws or avoid public records requests by doing something sneaky, like, I just love living in the age of modern technology where you find out. You watch a lot of shows like Downton Abbey, Gilded Age, all those Julian Fellows shows that I watch. They're so antiquated, and they're back in times where you're like, wow, a Google search or a cell phone would have solved all these problems. We live in an age where Google searches and cell phones can solve a lot of problems. And like, you're gonna get caught. You do something sneaky, you're gonna get found out, and someone's gonna do something about it. And we love to see that happen.
Well, I need to say this. If it wasn't for the Knox News Sentinel, it might not have.
I
I mean, you
agree.
have to give them a ton of credit for filing this
Yes.
lawsuit. And, and it doesn't matter where we're at on that. I mean, it was great. And I mean, I think that just kind of going back to this, the one part that we didn't talk about is how much it costs taxpayers. So they already pay for an HR department there. They had to spend $43,000 for this external search firm to avoid public records, and then $67,000 to defend their lawsuit in court from an outside law firm. So it costs $110,000 instead of just doing the right thing to begin with. And that's why, in my mind, this was the most offensive entry, because it mixed a disdain for transparency with indifference towards taxpayers. And I think that really bothered me about this entry.
Yeah, it's so ethically problematic. It's ethically problematic. And then you pile on the fact that, like, all that money that was spent, how many potholes could that money fill? That Knoxville taxpayers are having to drive over bumpy roads. I hate driving on bumpy roads. And so whenever I see entries in the Pork Report, I'm like, how many potholes could this fill? Like,
Yep.
how many additional police officers could be hired for public safety
picking up
in
trash
Memphis because of how much trash could be picked up for the expense of bad things in Nashville, Memphis, Knoxville, wherever they're having trash problems outside of Davidson County, because we have trash problems here. That's what really bugs me is it's not really opportunity cost, but in a way, I guess it's not really opportunity cost, but it's just like redirected money into something that could go to an actual public service.
I mean,
this
was literally lighting money on fire too. It wasn't even like, oh, it's a bad. It's not like it was a bad expense like corporate welfare. Like, it's going somewhere. It's not getting a good return. It's still a terrible investment, but it's at least going somewhere. Not just like, oh, this was for something that we would have done the same exact way with $110,000 more.
I know. There were a few entries in here that were legitimately lighting money on fire. I mean, I think that's kind of like what the Pork Report is. But you want to talk about lighting money on fire? That old McDonald's farm, that is lighting money on fire. It's literally tossing money in a sinkhole. Like, it's done. That was ridiculous. Mark, tell me about why is East Tennessee catching so much?
I know.
Here,
I know. Well, I mean, they had some of the more offensive entries, and I feel like this one. I love the McDonald Farm one because this was we talk so much about what's going to happen, and this was a "we told you so" moment. We put this McDonald Farm in the Pork Report 2 years ago. So just for background, Hamilton County bought this big farm for $16 million. They wanted to turn into all these things. They had no business commitments when they did it. It kind of reminded me of the West Tennessee mega site, which took 15 years to get somebody for. First of all, not the role of government to get all this land. A lot of it was unusable. They found out. But in our Pork Report, I want to quote you from 2 years ago what we said. One can only hope this project doesn't continue to cost taxpayers like the countless other government projects that require more funds than disclosed down the road. So we said that. We were worried about that. Guess what? We were right. There was a sinkhole in the property we just found out, which the government is now required to pay for. It cost $100,000 for them to examine the sinkhole, just a review of the property, and it's going to cost at least another $1 million to fix the structural issues. And my guess is entirely more. So this is one where we have the county mayor saying we were wrong to put this in the Pork Report. This is going to pay for itself. Not only is it not paying for itself, it's costing more than we even thought it was. And yeah, they're doing a county fair there. Is that worth $18 million or whatever? It's just, we warned people about this. We warned the city of Memphis about the film and TV subsidies, and we're right. Every time we put something in this report, we are right. And there's times that we're saying like, hey, this hasn't actually happened all the way yet. We're going to tell you to keep an eye on this. And
look alive, people.
The Chattanooga example, or the Hamilton County, was really, really frustrating. And then they found out that not only that, 28% of the land they purchased is actually located in another county. So they can't even do anything with that. This was just government incompetence to the extreme. It seemed like something, and the county mayor, I've heard, the former county mayor, Jim Coppinger, is a nice guy. I've heard nothing but good things about him personally. It seemed like this was just a project he wanted to say, I'm doing this before I get out of office. And it has been a disaster. And even the very commissioners who voted for it have questioned it in meetings like, maybe this wasn't worth it. It's like, no crap. If you would have seen our report 3 years ago, you would have listened to that. So that one's frustrating, but it's also like, hey, we usually know what we're talking about. So maybe take heed of what we're putting in this report.
Like, we're taking a lot of time to actually look and study, and we're not just doing this to hammer you guys. We're doing this
No.
to say, we're paying into these systems too, and we don't want to pay into them anymore. So take heed, look alive. The whole Old McDonald situation has been a comedy of errors start to finish. And it's only comedy because if we don't laugh, we cry. That's just how it is. I mean, but like, I think that the worst example from East Tennessee has to do with America's pastime.
Oh yeah.
The baseball team. Dog, in what world is moving a baseball team like a stone's throw away worth millions of dollars? Mark, give them a rundown of what I'm talking about because I actually don't think I can speak on it because my love of baseball and my hatred of useless spending, it's intersecting, and you know what happens is usually a volcano. So I need to shut up. Tell everybody what's going on.
This one is fun in a way that's crazy. So we talked about stadium subsidies. This was a stadium subsidy to move a summer league baseball team. So not a real baseball team, just college kids playing summer ball, a few miles away from Bristol, Virginia, to Bristol, Tennessee. It cost $5 million to upgrade a softball stadium to move them to Bristol, Tennessee. And it's interesting who lobbied for it the most, but it was somebody from the Bristol City Council. And he also happened to be the unpaid president and general manager of the baseball team and was quoted as being the loudest voice in the process to move this team. Now, before we talk about, stadium subsidies are always terrible ideas. We've talked about them a million times. Guess how much the State Liners is what they're called. Guess how much money the Bristol State Liners brought in ticket revenue last year?
Any amount of money that I would guess would be too much.
$349. That is how much they brought in ticket sales. So the idea that this is a good investment is absolutely asinine. It takes more to probably take care of the field for 2 weeks than what they bring in ticket sales. So it's like, if I'm a Bristol, Tennessee taxpayer, I'm hoping that somebody on my city council isn't part of a beer league softball team. Because if they do that, who knows what kind of stadium they're going to get.
That's quite literally less money than I spent on Christmas presents for my 4-person family. Like, that is such little money. And I don't ball out at Christmas, but that's such little money. Like, it's actually unbelievable.
That's less than I spent betting in a 5-minute time period. Like, it is crazy how little money that is. And the idea that, this is the same place that put $1 million for pickleball courts. I mean, Bristol, Tennessee, this is going to be hard for me to say because I feel like we've had so many bad examples. This is the worst stadium deal I have ever seen in Tennessee. It is actually the worst in terms of ROI. Yes, there's been more money spent, and honestly, yes, taxpayers have lost more money, because they're spending so much more to begin with. But there is no study in the world, no matter how biased it is, that can say that this will help, that they'll actually ever be able to pay this off. This is, insane.
To the homies in Bristol, I hope y'all are physically fit, the most physically fit area in Tennessee, because y'all got your pickleball courts, you got your baseball stadium. Like, y'all better be the most physically fit people because y'all are putting a lot of money into facilities for athletics. I can't imagine.
It's not even a minor league baseball team. It is a college summer league team. $349 of that. I just can't. I can't imagine who thought it was a good idea. And you have to, and I'm not blaming any one individual person, but if that council member was not, their unpaid general manager, there's no way this happens. There's no justification from an economic perspective. And if I'm a Bristol taxpayer, I am so livid about this because there's no way you're going to get, nobody watches them play. $349. Like, there's no way you're going to watch them play. No. And paying this money is, you're right. East Tennessee, honestly, I think that so many years it's been Nashville and Memphis that have been the worst. East Tennessee is the worst this year. East Tennessee, all of theirs are super offensive.
They're so bad. Like, what is happening in East Tennessee? They are crumbling over there. It's so bad. If you don't believe us, and if you haven't seen it yet, what you waiting for? Go look at the Pork Report, beacontn.org/pork2023. Go check it out. We've got an interactive version. We've got like a Cliff Notes version, a PDF version. We've got all the versions that you could ever want to go and look at. Go check it out. Tell us what you think is the worst. And even if you don't look at it on our website, I can almost guarantee you that a news outlet in your area has covered this because the coverage of this report was absolutely popping off last night. So go check it out. And listen, I say this about all the issues we cover. our eyes and our ears can't be everywhere. We try and we do a really good job usually, but they can't be everywhere. If something shady is going on in your neck of the woods and you're like, why is this money being spent in this way? Tell us. We want to know. We'll bring attention to it. The Pork Report's not going anywhere. It is a staple of Beacon Publications. We love it. We obviously get fired up about it. I should quit consuming coffee as I'm getting angrier because my heart is just going to like absolutely burst out. But like, tell us what's going on. We want to know and we want to talk about it. We're going to circle back to it in a minute with a little roundup question after we talk about something. But we would be remiss, and we wouldn't be ourselves, if we didn't switch gears for a moment and talk about the college football playoff. Listen, everyone knows how I feel. Okay, do I think that Alabama deserved to be in? Am I excited that Alabama is in? I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I know I literally texted Mark the day after the playoff committee, and I was like, if one more person texts me and says Alabama should not be in this, I am not on the playoff committee. I do not work for the University of Alabama. I have absolutely no decision-making power in almost any area of my life, especially this one. I am so tired of hearing it. That's my rant. That's my rampage. Let's get on to our predictions.
And let me say one thing too. I feel like she does not work for Alabama. The college football playoff committee might work for Alabama based on their picks, but I think anybody, I even said this to you. I didn't text you one time. There's no reason to criticize Alabama fans. There's no reason to criticize the University of Alabama. It's not their fault. They're getting favoritism. You know, like that's not on them. You have to blame the committee. I said this to Justin last week. I think it's accurate. It's like corporate welfare. Alabama is the recipient of corporate welfare, but we need to blame the government, not the organization, like the company's getting it. So I don't blame Alabama. The playoff committee, again, this was the worst decision ever, but I'm happy. It's made everyone who said that the SEC bias thing, that the arguments I've made for years were BS, be like, okay, you might have been right. So it's like the Pork Report. I am glad to be proven right. So that I'm happy about it.
Mark.
I'm vindicated, and everyone agrees. But before we do the playoffs, I do want to kind of talk about a couple, because there is other bowl games, right? Not just the playoffs.
Yes, I am very much looking forward to parking my happy behind on the couch for days and days and watching some bowl games and eating a lot of popcorn. I feel like popcorn is like my game day snack. I'm going to make nachos. I'm going to eat popcorn. I'm going to get fat and happy, and I'm going to watch a lot of bowl games. But Mark is my bowl game, like, don't watch this, do watch this. Be excited for this, don't care about that. So, Mark, what is my TV schedule for the holidays?
So I'm trying to think of exciting games, not necessarily going to win, but I think that the best game to watch, and I don't know how it's going to go, but I mean, I think Florida State versus Georgia is going to be so interesting.
I think it's going to be really interesting too.
Florida State is losing some guys. Are they motivated? They should be. Georgia, same thing. I mean, they were, one win away from being in the playoffs as well, and they kind of expected going into the last week they'd beat Alabama. So these are two teams that, most people thought were going to be in the playoff a week ago. And are not in the playoffs. So it'll be really interesting to see who shows up. And, if I was Florida State, it's like, we just got absolutely screwed out of the playoff. Am I motivated to show, hey, we deserve to be there? Or am I so disappointed? So it'll be really interesting to see what that looks like. I'm really, really excited about. This is the one that nobody's talking about. Liberty versus Oregon. People don't talk about Liberty is undefeated. I don't think people realize that they had not lost the game this year.
But honey, you're actually in the entire world, you're the only person talking about this game.
It's one of the big bowl games. It's one of the January 1st bowl games. But it's an undefeated Liberty team that has just gotten basically just trashed by the media. And they were saying that it's nobody believes them at all. They've done nothing but going undefeated. Look, I'm not saying they deserve to be in the playoff, but they are pretty good. And this is maybe the most overrated Oregon team that I've seen. They play in a terrible conference. The Pac-12's trash. And it's a 17-point spread. But if you want a great upset pick, watch out for Liberty to win this game outright. And then I'm excited about two other games I'll just talk about briefly, but it's kind of an SEC like measuring stick games where they're both, double-digit favorites. But Tennessee versus Iowa will be interesting. You have the Vols who finished the season.
Would never.
Pretty poorly. You have Iowa who just can't score points. They have to win the game on defense. They might have to win 3-0. But then we'll see what LSU has. They're playing a Wisconsin team that's down, who's lost a lot of their players. I think they're a 14-point favorite or 8 or 9-point favorite. But some of these are good indications of what's going to happen in the playoff. Because if you see somebody like LSU lose, right, you see somebody like Georgia lose, you might think, wow, Alabama, like the SEC might just be horrendous and I should be betting against them. Or you see the opposite, right? You see the SEC doing well, the Big Ten doesn't do well, and you say, well, maybe I don't think Michigan's that good because this conference is not great. So I think that those games are good, kind of predecessors to what's going to happen and how teams
Yeah.
do, in my opinion, how teams do in the, the bowl games are a good indication of how the conference is, which is why I think the SEC has been terrible the past 6 years.
Fair. So with that, and before we do our wrap-up question, who do you think is going to be in the national championship game?
I have Washington winning the one side, and I have the Wolverines of Michigan winning the other side. And my pick is Michigan to win it all. I will say that I am maybe less confident than I've been because Alabama absolutely should not be there. It doesn't mean they can't win though. Like, and there's a difference between that. I mean, they're a good team. I mean, I don't think they're a great team, but I'm not sure that any of these teams are great this year. That's kind of my opinion. I feel like college football, the teams at the top are way less good than they normally are. So I think Michigan beats Alabama, but I'm not like super confident of it. And I think Washington, Texas is basically a toss-up. And, I think Washington's offense is just maybe a little bit too good. And I think the Big 12 was down this year too. So I got Michigan, but I got Michigan win all, but in a very non-confident way. What about you?
Well, I am here for redemption. I want to play Texas in the national championship.
Texas round 2.
And I want to beat the doors off them. When we played Georgia in 2021 for the SEC championship and we beat them, and then we went to the national championship and we got beat by them, I tend to think that a rematch will be a little switcheroo. And so I would love a January rematch with Texas for redemption. That's what I'm gunning for. That's what I want. That's all I want for Christmas. Anyone who's listening, God, that's all I want for Christmas is an Alabama-Texas rematch.
So let me ask you, here's a question. So say Alabama wins and say that Washington is a better matchup for Alabama to win the national championship. Would you rather have a chance to beat Texas again, or you have a better chance to win and beat Washington?
No.
You want Texas?
I want to. You know me. I'm not actually playing. I'm sure the Alabama players would rather run over Washington
Probably,
if they win.
Yeah.
But for someone like me, I caught so much crap from everyone who had a voice box after the Texas game that I would love a shot at redemption. And I think the way that our boys play and the anger and the fire that they play with, I think they'd come out with a vengeance against Texas. And so that's what I'm hoping for. I love chaos. I love spice when it comes to sports. And I think that this would be a spicy, chaotic matchup. And I would love to see it.
That might actually be the most watched national championship game because that would be there'd be so much because they're also both huge fan bases. Like it's on top of everything else, and it would be interesting. And the whole reason why Alabama's even in this discussion, because if they beat Texas, there's no discussion. Not only are they in, they're the number 1 seed. So they lost to Texas, but they really got beat down by them at home in Alabama.
It was bad.
So
it was ugly.
Even if that game was a lot closer, or if it was, I had my friend said this, and he's right. He's like, if Alabama would have been on the road and lost by 3, that's a different situation. Being at home and losing by double digits, it's tough to do. So unless I do think Saban's a better coach, but watching the way that they just outplayed you, it's hard to imagine that they'd be able to win that game. It's not impossible, but it's hard to imagine.
Over us. I know they ran all over us, but
Saban's a better coach now.
Team. Yeah, and a later season team is a lot different than an earlier season team. There's been practice, there's been trial and error, there's been a lot of growth. I think we would have a shot
against the season team that just almost lost to Auburn, though. That should have lost to.
But didn't.
I'm saying you haven't looked substantially better, in my opinion.
A win's a win. A win's a win.
I get it, but you don't look like. Here's the issue I have. You don't look like a different team to me. You don't. You don't look like a different team than that team there. You just played a bunch of trash teams. You've won close games against trash teams, and you played a pretty good game against Georgia. That's one game. That's not a trend. You played well in one game.
That's fair. I do think there's a mindset, though, in the Alabama football program of we're not going to let them do it to us again. Like, I think that that would be kind of like the mindset, and there would be, because there's just so much more to lose in a game like that. And I think it would be a really good game. I mean, remember when we played them in the 2009 season for the national championship, and Colt McCoy's arm, like he hurt his arm in the first quarter or something, and it was just like dangling there the entire rest of the game. That was so sad. But it was like it was at the Rose Bowl. I'll never forget it. I ate black bean soup that night, and that's been my national championship meal every year since then, because it was such a beautiful victory right before I left for college to go to Alabama. So, all that to say, over 10 years later, I would love to see another Alabama Texas matchup in the national championship. Roll
It would
Tide's
be
already
fun.
in.
And the world is, I mean, I think the world is cheering against Alabama, not because people hate them,
Sure.
but they're saying, they don't deserve to be there. And this whole idea that the committee said that they're like on paper the best team. If they go out and lose in the first round, it's like, you guys are really in trouble. It's going to make them look so much worse if they go out, especially if they lose like somewhat substantially. People are
I
saying
know.
they're going to get crucified for it, and deservedly so.
I know.
And
Yeah.
or if Florida State somehow beats Georgia, they're going to have a lot to deal with. But
There's going to be a lot.
we will
I'm
see.
glad I'm not on that committee.
I mean, I think it's
No, thank you.
I would resign from the committee. I would resign as part of that and come out and be like, I am not for what they say. Just to be clear, I am not. They're not football, whatever. We talked about this. It's ridiculous they're there. It doesn't mean they can't win, though. And that's kind of where we're at. And it does mean you should cheer against them, but it does not mean they can't win. And don't take it on Taylor personally. It's not her fault.
Yeah, don't take it out on me. Just me and my little Alabama fandom. It's not my fault. Before we go, let's circle back to the pork report really quick. We talked about there are so many egregious examples in the pork report. The holidays are coming. Mark, I'm not getting you a Christmas present. I'm really sorry. I'll make you a pot roast at some point. It's his favorite food, and I make a mean pot roast. I'll make you a pot roast sometime. But I'm not getting you a Christmas present. But if I was going to get you a present, and you had to choose, if I gave you a list, and that is the pork report, and you had to choose your Christmas present of one thing from the pork report to be fixed, eradicated, done for, never again, what would be your Christmas gift?
Oh man, it's so hard because there's so many.
I know.
So ultimately, I would want something.
I hope you don't pick the one that I pick.
I would want something that would have longer ranging effects. So just, getting rid of this one Bristol stadium would be great, but it would still happen. So I think the one I would pick, only because of what I think it could affect generally, would be what happened. Oh, it's so close, but I'm between two. The property tax increase is number two, because we could do something with that, and you could pass a statewide cap. It would eradicate that completely. These huge property taxes. But the one I pick is what happened in Knoxville. I think going around open records is so offensive. And I think when that happens, these people need to be held accountable. When you're not being transparent to the public, that's a bigger issue than everything. And the way that we've seen government transparency, I think in the past few years, actually get worse. This needs to be almost like a landmark case of saying, you cannot do this. People need to be aware. I don't care what it is. Open records are so important to us, to the media, to everyone, that I think them getting batted down in court and that not happening again would be more important to me than any other precedent that we could set this year. What about you?
Well, if I had to choose, this was a hard one for me too, but if I had to choose, it would be the Memphis television subsidy for yet another canceled show. I am so tired. And I watch a lot of television, and we always see at the very end of a lot of television shows and movies, there's a little Georgia peach, like supported by Georgia. They do a lot of film subsidies there, whatever. We don't need that. We don't need that. We don't want that. Memphis needs public safety. Memphis needs aid in their schools. Memphis needs roads. I love Memphis. I think Memphis is such a lovely city. I love it in Memphis. And I wish that they would make better decisions for the people who live there. Like giving a television show that is not great. I haven't actually watched it, but I looked up some YouTube clips. That was a stinker of a show. I could barely make it through YouTube videos.
And you watch trash and you still think it stinks. So that shows how bad that is.
I watch Bravo constantly, and I thought that Young Rock was trash. So I think I think if it's too bad for me, it's like really bad. It was a terrible show. Bluff City Law, also terrible. It's just sad when cities keep making the same mistake over and over again at the expense of their citizens and services that their citizens need, could use, want. should be the role of government. It's just sad for me. And so I think if I could ask for one thing for Christmas, it would be no more film subsidies, specifically in Memphis, Shelby County, but maybe all over Tennessee.
I think your point was really funny too, because I watched the show Thousand Pound Sisters, and they are interesting. But
Yes.
at the end of it, it said it's like paid for by the state of Kentucky. Like, do you really want your state associated with this? Like I think if anything, that's costing you money. And I mean, and I love Tammy and Amy, but like, I don't think that that's necessarily a great indication of the people in your state. But it's also like, why does Memphis want their name? Be like, oh, there's this terrible TV show. Guess what? If you want something
So
terrible,
bad.
come to Memphis. It's like, it's still a good TV show. Like, say what you want, but like, if you're, if it was like whatever, a popular TV show like Friends or something, that's like fine. I get why you'd want to be associated with it.
Yeah.
Why don't you be
But
associated with Young Rock?
Rock? It's
Even
so terrible.
I,
It's so terrible.
I had a great interview with a news reporter in Knoxville. He's like, I love wrestling, so this really caught my eye. But like, this doesn't seem like a great investment. I'm like, yeah, it's not. Good call.
Good call. Watch like one YouTube video, and when you can't get past it, and you're like, "Get me back to my Bravo trash television," like 30 seconds in, that's when you know that things are
Yes.
bad.
I think that's a good suggestion by you. And hopefully Memphis' second failed show they'll learn. They say,
Yes.
fool me once, shame on you. So hopefully
Uh-huh.
this will now stop. I know it won't, because
And
Memphis Edge.
especially, I know, especially coming from me though, I consume so much television content. I watch so much television. And if I'm saying get Tennessee out the biz of creating my primary form of entertainment, that says a lot coming from me. Like we're not interested. We don't want it. Get it out of here.
Yeah.
That would be my ideal Christmas gift.
Unless we're
My
not paying
Christmas
money.
wish.
If we're not paying money, then fine.
Sure.
Film here. Yeah, we're
Come
happy if
on.
you film here. Maybe someone put your name if it's a terrible show, but film here. Just don't take any of our money to film here.
Yeah. We don't want to give you any more money. We would love roads and trash pickup and police officers and
Yeah.
healthy food in schools and like things.
Don't you
at
think
public
Memphis
schools.
could maybe use more police officers instead of this show? I could be wrong, but maybe that seems like maybe Memphis could use that.
I also feel like Memphis could probably use like better lunches in their schools. So that was one of the things we heard at the listening tour that we did, that there were parents with children in public schools that they didn't like the lunches that they had and they felt like cheap lunches. Okay, so instead of giving money to The Rock, let's like put some money in the public schools and get these kids some good lunches. I don't know. Just a suggestion.
Just spend it on anything else.
Don't say that or they will.
I know.
That's a scary thing. Well, if you haven't read the pork report yet, like I said, visit beacontn.org/pork2023. It's all over our social media if you want to click on it from there. We're just very thankful that we live in a place and we work in a place where people actually love to read our work. Like we've said a million times, we yearn for the day that Beacon is no longer necessary to point these things out, but unfortunately it is. But we're so thankful, especially around the holidays. Everybody's attention is here, there, and everywhere. But we're thankful that you guys watch us, listen to us, read our work. And like we said, if there's any pork in your area that you want to point out, we are all ears. Mark, any final thoughts before we say goodbye to these lovely people?
Just echo what you said. Thank you for reading. I mean, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be able to do this report. The fact that it gets so much media
Sure.
that you all read it is the reason we do it. So we appreciate it.
We appreciate you so much. If you haven't already, you should subscribe to Decaf on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit beacontn.org/pork2023. That's the last time I'll say it. Have a great weekend, beautiful people. We'll talk to you later.